You remember the sound, the can opener punching through the metal lid, that exhale of air, and then the smell hit you. Your mother's kitchen, 6 in the morning, before the world got complicated. That coffee doesn't exist anymore. What's inside that can now was decided in a boardroom, not a roastery. They changed the beans, they cut corners on the roast, they stretched the formula, and they kept the label exactly the same because they were counting on you to trust the name. We dug through thousands of reviews, FDA records, and federal lawsuits, all to find the 9 brands you need to stop buying and the 3 that actually deserve to be your first sip in the morning. And the man who invented the most popular coffee product in America, he told the world he wishes he never did it. He doesn't even own one. Let's start with the brand nobody wants to hear about because everybody trusts Costco. 1. Kirkland Signature. Costco. This is the one nobody wants to hear because Costco is supposed to be the good guys. The bulk buy paradise where everything is cheaper and somehow still quality. Their Kirkland Signature Colombian is a Costco staple, one of the bags people grab without thinking. The label says 100% Colombian. The price often works out to around $5.99 a pound. Here's what that price doesn't say. In March of 2023, the FDA issued a Class 2 recall on Kirkland Colombian Cold Brew. Metal fragments inside the cans. Nearly 2,800,000 cans pulled from shelves. That's not a quality hiccup. That's an industrial failure with your name on the receipt and proof that pressure to keep prices down leads to shortcuts. And here's the quiet part. For years, some Kirkland bags literally said custom roasted by Starbucks. Somewhere in the mid-2000s, that line quietly disappeared. Just gone. So who's roasting your coffee now? Nobody knows. You're trusting a bag that won't even introduce you to the person who made what's inside. Romantic. Now let's talk about what lands in your cup. Food Republic opened a bag in 2025 and said the beans smelled burnt and looked oily before they even touched water. Nothing enjoyable about sipping it. Sonoma Magazine was less polite. They said the beans looked like they'd survived a scorched earth policy. Take ash, push it through a cheesecloth, and you'll have a fair idea of what you're drinking. That's not a review, that's a crime scene description. Kirkland starts this list because it's not the most dangerous coffee you'll hear about today. It's the most trusted name hiding the least transparency. $5.99 a pound when comparable single-origin Colombian often runs $12 to $15. For a gap that wide, something in the sourcing or the quality has to give. Ask Costco and all you'll hear is the standard line about complying with regulations. That's the sentence you get when there's no good answer and the lawyers are running the show. Costco won't tell you who's roasting your coffee now. Walmart won't tell you how much coffee is actually in the can. And the math on one is about to prove they can't. 2. Great value. Walmart. I want you to do some math with me just for a second, because this one falls apart the moment you pick up a calculator. A federal class action. That's a lawsuit filed on behalf of every customer who bought it, called Sulzer versus Walmart, alleges that Great Value coffee delivers up to 72% fewer cups than the label promises. The can says 120 cups. The lawsuit says you're getting 33. That's not a rounding error. That's a missing 87 cups. Walmart printed a number on the label and a courtroom is now deciding whether they made it up. Now here's where the math gets uncomfortable. Great Value Classic Roast sells for around $4.50 to $5 a pound. In 2025, the raw commodity price for Arabica, that's what the beans cost before anyone touches them, spiked above $4 a pound. Walmart is selling you finished coffee for barely more than the raw ingredient costs. That only works if something in that chain is getting squeezed. The bean quality, the blend, or how much coffee you're actually getting. Cheap commercial coffees have been caught containing husks, twigs, and plant scraps blended in. Researchers proved it at an American Chemical Society conference. They didn't test Great Value, but they proved the practice exists at this price point, and you can taste it. Across consumer reviews, the same complaint appears over and over. Watery, thin, needing double the recommended scoops just to taste like actual coffee. You're using twice the product to get 1 cup's worth of flavor. Even without the lawsuit, your own coffee maker is calling that label a lie. Great Value is number 2 on this list because it's the clearest case of impossible economics. The price can't be real and the coffee can't be whole. One of those things has to give, and it's not the price. Walmart's label promised 120 cups. The lawsuit says you got 33, but at least Walmart only ripped you off. The next brand took something more personal. 3. Maxwell House. Your grandmother's kitchen smelled like Maxwell House. If you opened a can today and put it under her nose, she'd ask you what went wrong. In late 2025, while consumers were furious about rising prices and collapsing quality, Kraft Heinz temporarily rebranded Maxwell House as Maxwell Apartment, a marketing gimmick tied to affordability anxiety. They saw your frustration and turned it into a punchline. Bold strategy from a company that just paid $16 million in a federal settlement for lying about how many cups their coffee makes. That settlement covered both Maxwell House and Euban. Same lawsuit, same parent company, Same lie on two different labels. Kraft Heinz told you how many cups were in the can. A federal judge said the number was wrong, $16 million wrong. And the quality behind that label? Independent tasters have scored Maxwell House near the bottom of every list it appears on. Tasting Table ranked it dead last among 9 instant coffees, not near the bottom. Last, here's what the people who actually drink it are saying. A 56-year-old woman wrote on Coffee Detective, "My great-grandmother, grandmother, and mother all drank Maxwell House. What on earth is going on down there?" On complaints boards, someone said the new formulation tastes like somebody dumped metal filings into your coffee. And on Pissed Consumer, and this one landed, "It is the nastiest coffee I have ever spit in my sink." Maxwell House is number 3 because it combines everything from the first 2 entries and adds betrayal on top. Kirkland hid the roaster. Walmart hid the math. Maxwell House watched 4 generations of women trust this brand, and then let Kraft Heinz run the 3G-style zero-based budgeting playbook on what was inside the can. Quality doesn't justify itself on a spreadsheet. Margins do. And when the margins win, your grandmother's kitchen stops smelling the way you remember. Same company, same playbook. But Maxwell House at least raised the price when they cut the quality. The next brand changed what was inside the bag and never said a word. 4. Ubon. They didn't even have the decency to change the label. Remember that $16 million settlement? That wasn't just Maxwell House. Ubon was in the same lawsuit, same parent company, same lie, same check. But Ubon did something Maxwell House didn't. Around 2020, Kraft Heinz quietly reformulated Ubon from Colombian-only sourcing to a broader blend labeled 100% Arabica. The taste changed. The packaging barely budged. Nobody was told. The people who'd been drinking it for decades figured it out with their mouths. On Coffee Detective, a 30-year Ubon loyalist wrote, "I have been a Ubon coffee drinker for 30 years and now have to find a new favorite. The new Ubon is nothing like the previous version." Another one, "Just purchased a canister of Ubon Original Coffee yesterday. This morning I made a pot of what I thought was coffee. What is this?" Tasting Table called it a thing of the past. Careless ownership by a mega-sized food producer. MASH said all the excitement and taste of yesteryear had been replaced by a yawn-worthy brand. Ubon is number 4 because it's the quietest betrayal on this list. No recall, no glass, no lawsuit about what's in the beans. Just a company that swapped out what was inside the bag, kept the same label, and waited to see if you'd notice. You noticed. 2 brands, same parent, same lawsuit, same lie on the label. But they're not the only ones wearing costumes in the coffee aisle. Connect the dots. 4 brands, 4 different labels. 2 of them owned by the same company. Both caught in the same lawsuit. Both paid out of the same $16 million settlement. And you were supposed to think they were competitors, but it gets worse. Kraft Heinz owns Maxwell House and Ubon. J.M. Smucker owns Folgers, and its instant coffee tested above Europe's acrylamide benchmark for a chemical linked to cancer. Nestle paid $7 billion to put the Starbucks name on coffee it manufactures itself. Jab Holding, out of Luxembourg, owns Keurig, Peet's, Stumptown, Intelligentsia, and Green Mountain. Every independent label, 1 holding company. You thought you had 30 choices in the coffee aisle. You have 4 companies and 30 costumes. And everything you've heard so far, that was about your wallet. The next 5 entries are about your body. If you're still watching, subscribe, because what's coming makes the first half look like a warm-up. 5. Clover Valley, Dollar General. There are things in coffee that shouldn't be there. Chemicals, fillers, marketing lies, and then there's glass. In August of 2025, Dollar General recalled Clover Valley instant coffee after glass fragments were found inside the jars. The FDA put it in writing, and the language they used is worth hearing exactly as they wrote it. Glass ingestion may damage teeth, lacerate the mouth and throat, or perforate the intestine. Perforate the intestine from a $3 jar of instant coffee. That's your Tuesday morning. Picture it. 6 a.m. You're half awake. You scoop brown powder into the same mug you use every day. Pour boiling water. Stir. Drink. And somewhere in that powder, glass. Fragments so small you can't see them, can't feel them, can't taste them. Not until they're already inside you. Would you know? Would anyone? The recall covered 8-ounce jars across 48 states. Best by date stretching into 2026. Most people never see recall notices, and jars of this coffee are still sitting in kitchen cabinets right now where nobody ever got the warning. Dollar General's official response? No reported injuries at time of announcement. Translation? Nobody's called us yet. That's not a safety record. That's a head start. Clover Valley is number 5 because this is where the list stops being about money and starts being about your body. The first 4 brands cheated your wallet. This one could have sent you to the emergency room. And at least glass is an accident. The next brand knows exactly what's in the can. They've known for years and they keep selling it. 6. Folgers, J.M. Smucker. This one hurts. Because if you grew up in America, Folgers was probably the first coffee you ever smelled. Red can, kitchen counter. That jingle, the best part of waking up. Here's the best part they left out. FDA survey data show Folgers instant coffee at approximately 458 micrograms per kilogram of acrylamide, a chemical that forms when food is cooked at extreme heat. The world's top cancer research body classifies it as a probable human carcinogen. Not possible, probable. Europe drew a line at 400. Folgers instant blew past it. The FDA drew nothing. No line, no limit, no comment. 3 different ways to say you're on your own. And here's what should keep you up at night. Coffee science is clear, lighter roasts produce less acrylamide. Every major roaster knows how to adjust that dial. Folgers keeps roasting dark. Dark roasts sell better. You associate that color with strength. And changing the process would cost money. So the number stays high, the revenue stays higher. Smucker's coffee segment pulled in $2.8 billion last year. That's roughly $8 from every person in America. They raised prices multiple times. You're paying more for the same cup that Europe flagged. You may have heard Folgers carried a cancer warning in California, but not in other states. That used to be true. California has since exempted coffee from Prop 65, so now there's no label anywhere. The chemical didn't leave. The warning did. And here's the part I need to be careful saying, because this is not a medical claim. This is a question. If the EU drew a line and Folgers Instant sits above it, why are you the one who has to figure that out from an FDA database? Across consumer forums, Coffee Detective, Reddit, review after review, the same complaints show up over and over. The grind is almost a powder now. It doesn't smell like Folgers anymore. Stomach upset after drinking it. One longtime buyer said every time they drank it, they felt nauseated. These aren't isolated complaints. This is a pattern. Hundreds of people describing the same collapse in a product their families trusted for decades. Folgers is number 6 because Clover Valley's glass was an accident, a factory failure. Folgers acrylamide is a choice, the biggest ground coffee brand in America, and their instant product sits above a line that an entire continent decided mattered. The science says lighter roasts lower the number. Folgers keeps going dark. That's not an accident. That's quarterly earnings. At least Folgers puts its own name on the can. The next brand charges you a premium for a famous name, and someone else entirely makes what's inside. 7. Starbucks Grocery. You're paying Starbucks prices for that bag. The green logo, the cafe promise brought home. But the company making what's inside? That's Nestlé. Surprise! In 2018, Nestlé paid $7.15 billion to manufacture and distribute Starbucks packaged coffee outside of Starbucks stores. Starbucks kept the cafes. Nestlé got the grocery aisle. You got a familiar logo with a stranger's coffee behind it. $7 billion. Not for the beans. For the sticker. Now here's what that stranger has been doing. In 2024, the National Consumers League sued Starbucks. The charge? Marketing grocery coffee as ethically sourced while the supply chain included child labor, forced labor, and human trafficking at supplier farms. And the lawsuit says Starbucks knew and kept buying from those suppliers anyway. In February 2025, Coffee Watch and Empower documented ongoing labor abuses in both Starbucks and Nestlé's Mexican supply chains. 2 companies behind one bag, neither one clean. But the label still says ethically sourced, and you're overpaying for it. Starbucks grocery often works out to roughly 35 to 50 cents a cup. Peet's, which actually roasts its own coffee, typically lands closer to 30 to 40. You're spending more on Nestlé manufactured beans than on a brand that still controls its own process. So what exactly are you paying for? That's not a quality premium. That's the most expensive sticker in the grocery store. The taste confirms it. Across consumer forums and review sites, the same criticism appears again and again. Starbucks over-roast to mask the flavor profile of lower quality beans. When that many people independently reach the same conclusion, it stops being opinion. The roasting isn't a style choice, it's a cover-up in a dark roast bag. Starbucks Grocery is number 7 because it does everything the lower entries do. Questionable sourcing, masked flavor, corporate cost-cutting, but charges you a premium for it. The brands below at least had the decency to be cheap while they lied. Starbucks charged you extra and handed you Nestlé. Starbucks sold its grocery soul and kept the logo. Nestlé bought the production line and kept the margin. You kept paying both of them. Now let me show you what Nestlé does with the coffee that carries its own name. 8. Nescafé Nestlé. Nestlé says it has zero tolerance for forced labor. Let me tell you what the investigators found. In 2025, investigative journalists went to the Brazilian coffee farms in Nestlé's Nescafé plan. The program Nestlé built specifically to prove its sourcing was responsible. Their showcase, their proof of concept. And on those certified farms, investigators documented conditions classified as modern slavery. Workers picking coffee cherries in heat that buckles your knees, sleeping in quarters with no running water, on farms Nestlé handpicked to represent the brand. Zero tolerance. Modern slavery. Pick one. Nestlé's response? They highlighted terminating one of the named suppliers, One Farm, out of a program built to prove they were clean. The certification was supposed to be the answer. Turns out the answer had the same problem as the question. And while Nestlé was busy printing responsibly sourced on the jar, nobody was printing what else is in it. Nescafé Instant sits in the same regulatory no man's land as Folgers. No FDA maximum for acrylamide, no required testing, no label. Europe drew a line. America shrugged. Nestlé kept selling. Nescafé's number 8 because Starbucks at least outsourced the dirty work to someone else. Nestlé did it under its own name on the farms it handpicked. That's not spin. That's a paper trail. Zero tolerance. Their words, not ours. The investigators' findings, also not ours. And the man who invented the most convenient coffee product in America, he told the world he wished he'd never done it. He doesn't even own one. That's next. 9. Keurig K-Cups, jab holding. The man who invented the K-Cup said this to The Atlantic, and I'm quoting him directly. I feel bad sometimes that I ever did it. His name is John Sylvan. He invented the single-serve coffee pod, sold his share of the company for $50,000, and watched it turn into $4.7 billion in annual revenue. He doesn't own a Keurig machine he called the K-Cup. His own invention, a cigarette for coffee, a single-serve delivery mechanism for an addictive substance. $50,000, $4.7 billion. Guess who won that deal? Now here's why the inventor's regret isn't just philosophical. In September of 2024, the SEC charged Keurig Dr. Pepper and fined them $1.5 million. Not enough to dent their quarterly coffee budget. The reason? Keurig told consumers their pods were recyclable through major curbside programs. The SEC found that 2 major U.S. recycling companies had already told Keurig directly that curbside recycling of K-Cups was not feasible. They knew. They printed recyclable on the box anyway. That's not optimism. That's securities fraud with a green label on it. Sylvan saw it coming. He told reporters the pods would never be recyclable. Specialized plastic made of 4 different layers. The inventor told you it can't be recycled. The company told the SEC it could. The SEC sided with the inventor. And then there's what's brewing inside the pod. A published lab study found hormone-disrupting chemicals in capsule-brewed coffee. The most common one was benzophenone, a compound used in printing inks. Not a Keurig-specific finding, but a format-level risk. Hot water under pressure, pushed through plastic and printed aluminum directly into your cup every single morning. Behind it all sits Jab Holding Company. Luxembourg. Every craft coffee label you think is independent. One holding company pulling the strings. And K-Cups cost 35 cents to $1 per cup. Ground coffee, 15 to 25 cents. You're paying a convenience tax every morning to a company whose own inventor told you to stop. Keurig is number 9. The worst on this list. Because every other brand at least pretended to care, this one's inventor told you not to use it, the SEC caught them lying, and they buried it all under a shelf full of independent labels that trace back to Luxembourg. Every brand below this one hid behind a label. Keurig hid behind an entire industry. That's 9 brands. 9 choices they made. But this video isn't ending on the worst cup of coffee in America. Because there are brands in that same aisle that prove every shortcut, every lie, every hidden chemical was optional. These 3 prove it. 10, 8 o'clock, coffee safe. After 9 brands that lied, hid, reformulated, and, in one case, put glass in the jar, you deserve to hear about a company that just made coffee. 8 o'clock Coffee. Founded 1859, 165 years. No FDA recalls, no class actions, no scandals about swapping beans in the middle of the night. In this industry, that's not a low bar, that's a miracle. When professional tasters scored an 8 o'clock blend, it cleared the specialty quality threshold. That's the line where coffee stops being grocery grade and starts competing with the expensive stuff. At this price, that's remarkable, and 8 o'clock sits completely outside the 4 companies that control the whole aisle, owned by Tata Consumer Products. Not Kraft Heinz, not Smucker, not Nestlé, not Jab. Nobody in Luxembourg is calling the shots on this bag. The reviews tell the story. Mashed said the smell is absolutely outstanding. Your nostrils will be convinced you've discovered the best coffee in the land. Across consumer forums, the word that keeps surfacing isn't bold or premium. It's honest. And one viewer comment cut deeper than any expert review. As a kid in the 60s, we went to the A&P, and I'll never forget the smell of 8 o'clock coffee at the checkout. That was 60 years ago. That smell still exists. The company that made it still exists. In the same aisle as Maxwell House, same generation of loyalty, same nostalgia, one brand kept the faith. The other handed the keys to 3G Capital and hoped you wouldn't notice the difference. You noticed. Will 8 o'clock blow your mind? No. Tasters call it good and reliable, not thrilling. But Maxwell House ranked dead last. Good looks pretty good from down there. The next brand proves that cheap coffee and clean coffee can be the same thing. And it does it from the same building as the worst brand on this list. 11. Café Bustelo. Safe. Here's the part that makes J.M. Smucker's entire defense fall apart. Remember Folgers? 458 micrograms per kilogram of acrylamide, above Europe's benchmark. Biggest ground coffee brand in America sitting on the wrong side of a line that an entire continent drew for a reason. Smucker's flagship. Now meet their other coffee, Café Bustelo. Dark roast. FDA testing puts Bustelo's acrylamide level at 134 to 142, less than a third of Folgers' number. Brewed, it tests at roughly 6 parts per billion, third lowest out of the brewed coffees they tested. Same parent company, one above Europe's line, the other nowhere near it. If Smucker can make Bustelo clean, everything Folgers does is a decision, not an industry limitation, not an unavoidable byproduct. A choice they made with your morning cup. Every single day. No FDA recalls, no class actions, no documented adulteration. Price competitive with or cheaper than Folgers per ounce. Cleaner coffee, same price, same company. Folgers just chose the other direction. And the people who drink Bustelo don't just like it. They're loyal the way people used to be loyal to Maxwell House before Kraft Heinz gutted it. Across reviews and comment sections, the same story surfaces over and over. My grandma drank it, my parents drank it, and now I drink it. For cheap coffee, Bustelo makes a hell of a product. Rich flavor with a real kick. One reviewer described the aroma as thick enough to wake you up before the water even hits the grounds. When 3 generations pass a coffee down without switching, that's not a brand. That's a family tradition the company had the good sense not to destroy. The honest limitation, no organic certification, no fair trade badge. Bustelo is honest coffee, not perfect coffee. But it's proof that the company behind the worst avoid brand knows how to make something better. They just chose not to for Folgers. The brand at the top of this safe list taught the founders of Starbucks everything they knew about coffee. And then those founders forgot every word of it. 12. Peet's Coffee. Safe. Alfred Peet opened a coffee shop in Berkeley in 1966. A Dutch immigrant who thought American coffee was an insult to the bean. The founders of Starbucks walked into his shop, tasted what real coffee could be, and built an empire on what he taught them. He supplied their original Pike Place store with its first roasted beans. One of those companies sold its grocery business to Nestle for $7 billion and let someone else make the coffee. The other one is still roasting its own. Guess which one tastes better? Major Dickinson's blend shows up at or near the top of almost every grocery dark roast ranking from major reviewers. That kind of consensus doesn't happen by accident, and the blind tests back it up. Taste of Home called it super smooth with no bitter aftertaste. A roasted aroma tester said was the coffee smell they wanted to wake up to every morning. Mashed went further, no other brand is as fresh tasting. Fresh. After everything you just heard, fresh tasting grocery coffee is so rare it earns you the top spot. No FDA recalls, no class actions, no public scandals over what's in the bag. Peet's earns the top safe spot because it does the one thing almost nobody else on this list could manage. It just makes good coffee and puts its own name on the bag. The honest limitation, Peet's is owned by Jab Holding. Same Luxembourg conglomerate behind Keurig. The corporate pressure is real and the price isn't cheap, 30 to 40 cents a cup. The coffee hasn't changed yet, but yet is doing real work in that sentence. Right now, cup for cup, Peet's often outperforms Starbucks grocery in blind tastings, and usually at a similar or lower price. One of those is a coffee decision. The other is a $7 billion sticker. That's the list. 9 brands that chose the margin, 3 that chose the cup, and if you want to go one step further, find a local roaster. Buy whole bean. Look for a roast date on the bag, not just an expiration date. Grind it yourself. That's $30 and a grinder between you and the best coffee you've ever had. If someone you care about starts their morning with one of these 9 brands, send them this video. They deserve to know what's in their cup. Click the video on screen for more investigations like this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because the list doesn't get shorter. The next time you open a can of coffee, take a breath before you pour. You'll know exactly what you're smelling, and you'll know who put it there.